Hello. Welcome back to our video series on policy debate. Again, with another video on the negative side of the debate. This time, we are going to talk about critiques with a K. Some of you out there may immediately recognize that is not typically how the word critique is spelled. It's special for debate, derived from the German, if you were interested. But let's talk about what a critique is. The basics of a critique are a philosophical or ideological objection to the affirmative plan. For example, if the affirmative plan talks about benefiting the economy, i.e. promoting capitalism, the negative can read a critique that argues that capitalism is bad, and therefore the affirmative's promotion of capitalism is also bad. In essence, it's a philosophical argument. It is not necessarily based upon current events, but rather on some philosophical question related to the affirmative. So why should I read one? Well, that's a great question, because as you will find out during your time in the East Policy program, we typically don't read critiques. There's a reason for that. Critiques are difficult to prove. The evidence supporting them is often not very good. So typically, the circumstances where we read them are few and far between. Therefore, the goal of this video is for you more to understand the basics of what a critique is, so that when you're affirmative and another team reads a critique against you, you can respond. But if you actually have the occasion where you could read a critique, when would you do it? Like all negative positions, the best time to read it is in the first negative constructive. So how do I make a critique? Well, very similar to all of the other negative arguments. You do research. Now, because they are a philosophical argument, the research typically takes place in books, and therefore it is a little bit harder to accomplish. One of the reasons we actually don't read critiques is because of the difficult and time-intensive investment needed to make one. So with that background, let's talk about the parts of the critique. Like every type of argument in debate, a critique has parts. 3 of them, to be exact. It starts out with a link argument. The link argument explains how the plan's action, the language used in the affirmative case, or the ideology of the affirmative case is in fact a bad thing, or promotes a particular ideology. Going back to the beginning, the promotion of the economy could be considered a promotion of capitalism, which the critique will argue is bad. It has an impact argument, which explains why whatever philosophical or ideological problem that the link argument identifies will lead to bad things if it is continued. So for those of you who have seen the disadvantage video, you should be noticing some similarities in the link and impact arguments of a critique and a disadvantage. They are, in fact, very similar. The final part of a critique is what we call an alternative. The alternative offers a solution to fixing the philosophical or ideological problem that the critique identifies. Now, typically, the alternative is not a policy-based action. Instead, it is often some other philosophical-based approach or a rejection of policy-based approaches altogether. But the idea there is that the alternative will resolve the problem the critique identifies. One parting note to help you better understand critiques. If you have seen the disadvantage video and the counterplan video, I want you to think of critiques as a disadvantage and a philosophical counterplan. And the arguments that we will talk about in addressing counterplans and disadvantages when we are affirmative will help us address critiques in much the same way.